reserve the committee meeting, resume the committee meeting. And we have in here an invoice from Paul, is that correct? Yeah, of the items. And are these the items that are missing?
Those were the items that I never got back.
Items you never
And
got.
I mean, I go over there and I take pictures. I mean,
Okay.
my kids will take pictures of the headstones or the things, will take a picture of whatever is over there. And I have a picture of the things that I didn't get back when they were there about 3 days before he went over there and picked everything up.
And they were not in his trunk after we
No, we
dismissed him?
searched every vehicle that was on his
Well, I mean,
property.
I don't think it's any need to belabor it, besides the fact that we know they were missing, we know the employee's gone.
There's been an issue with
The employee was
things
gone,
and-
simply, this is before you came on, the employee was dismissed because of this issue.
I mean,
So
that was-
I'd move to recommend to council to pay the full bill of, what is it
I think it's
total?
$148.
$148, and recommend that to council. I mean, there's no need to belabor it, and
Yeah,
it's happened, we can't,
27?
they're gone, so.
yeah.
I second.
You second?
Yeah.
August 27th, we
All right.
have a full count.
Okay. So we will take that, do that recommendation to the full council. Thanks. You're welcome.
I wish we could find it, but
I wish
they're
I
gone,
could
so
too,
the-
because
the
those
person-
two angel statues had been over there for 14 years.
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Before we leave cemetery, may I take
Yes, sir.
2 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Be quick too.
All right, it'll be a quick 2 minutes. I want to give you an update on the Confederate Monument story.
Debacle.
Debacle. Okay. We know, when we watch on the news and what's been going on, indeed, there have been several monuments, and I'll be honest with you, I just drove through the cemetery one day and noticed these weren't here before, and it was coincidental and about the same time as cemeteries in Richmond reported some thefts. So the end result is, after going through, and we found 2 additional headstones on Wednesday this week that were in the cemetery that were hidden under a bush. And there are 9 cemeteries that we can confirm that have items in or were in our cemetery, haphazardly just thrown around, thrown under a bush or behind a wall, or set up very nicely in the open, obvious. And it's not hard to, if you've ridden through the cemetery enough times, you notice something out of the place. So we can confirm 23 headstones that belong to individuals who are identified as being buried in other locations. Okay, that doesn't count all the unknowns, because there's several stones that we found thrown in the cemetery or thrown over the wall or on the edge of the woods that just have initials on them. I don't know if we'll ever identify those folks. I don't know if we'll ever identify the Confederate markers that were also set next to these footstones. Okay, 3 of the cemeteries have come and picked up their items. Okay, we identified them. You saw a picture in the paper this week, and town of Burkeville has come and picked up a stone that belonged to them. This town of South Boston came and picked up several stones, specifically old Confederate era stones, and have removed them. They did not take 2 of the iron crosses that we thought belonged to them. They said, we can't confirm that, so we're not going to take them and leave them. So those are as yet unidentified, but they were sitting with the stones from South Boston, and the city of Lynchburg, I shouldn't say that, Presbyterian Cemetery in the city of Lynchburg has come down and picked up their items. And so there are still 6 cemeteries outstanding: Ettrick, Blandford in Petersburg, Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Riverview in Richmond, Mount Calvary in Richmond, and is that 6?
But do you know why the person did that?
Just sick.
But I can tell you, we walked through that, the chief and I and Jessica walked the entire old section of the cemetery, and we removed those items, 21 items that we identified. Wait a minute, this isn't right.
Weeks ago or so.
And on Wednesday, as I was driving through the cemetery, I saw one thrown up under a bush. I believe that it continues. People are putting them in there. Certainly this week, in my opinion, could be wrong, could have overlooked it. But man, we walked all over that place, and it was not hard to see. I was driving in the truck when I noticed it. So I wouldn't be shocked if more stuff shows up. So we're proceeding on with observing the cemetery and watching the cemetery and see if we can identify if anybody's going in the cemetery. And there's a definition in your board packet that comes from the state code about access into cemeteries. We cannot prevent access to the cemetery for people who are legitimately there visiting their family, okay? Just like out in the country, if you own a piece of land, there's a cemetery in the middle of it, you gotta let people come and go to get to the cemetery. Dog walkers or, people jogging, they're not entitled to be in there, okay? But family members visiting graves are entitled to be in that cemetery, okay?
Middle of the
Even
day.
That's why you can't gate it.
Correct, yeah.
Pardon?
Even after dark?
Even after dark.
Okay. Is this a point where we want to consider doing, the hunter video cameras that,
I think Philip, I asked him the same question today. He said this stuff is already in place. He didn't want to get too
I think we're
involved.
taking care of
You
it.
don't want to.
okay,
Okay.
all right. And we need to go back and our recommendation to the council at large is that we are revising the cemetery policies as we discussed before the group left, and that we will take it back to square one. And are we all in agreement with
Yeah,
that?
I think general consensus.
And we
would
will
be-
have, and then we will have a public hearing. Okay. All right. The second item was the armory referendum, and I think we're gonna table that.
No problem. I just give you a time frame so you know, okay? In order for the town to hold a referendum, the state House of Delegates, Senate, the state of Virginia has to approve a charter amendment to let us hold this referendum. I didn't think we were gonna be able to do it at all, but Tessie did find where if Tommy Wright or Frank Ruff or another legislator were to introduce legislation at the state level, then we could schedule, and that would go into effect the 1st of July, then we could schedule a referendum thereafter.
Strictly, do you have to say what the referendum is for, or can it be just saying that we allow referendums?
Well, that's what the public hearing was gonna be for. Tessie had provided 2 different ones, and they were gonna present both to see which could be approved.
That's in your board packet.
Just the armory, or it could be in general.
I don't know if I know the answer to your question,
I mean, I just wish we could at any time, obviously,
but.
be able to hold a
And Tessie's
referendum
not sure
and
which
vote.
one.
Both of those.
Yeah, Tessie's not sure which one we could do, if you could do just anyone in general, or if it has to be one in specific. And the time frame when the previous council was working on this was, they wanted to have the public hearing by September, so that
Tommy Wright could
Tommy
receive
Wright could
it
have time.
and introduce the legislation for consideration in the January assembly. However, if you want to table it, it's not a problem. I understand it's a hot topic. But timing-wise, Tommy probably needs something in hand. Late fall, early winter probably at the latest to introduce the legislation in that process. Okay. If the plan is to do a referendum probably in the fall.
Fall, okay. All right. So,
I think the idea was that we were gonna get some new stuff this week,
new information,
so
some possibilities.
can we revisit it on middle of September,
Absolutely.
1st of September, so then we
Now we have a
can
committee meeting.
Yeah, we'll have another committee meeting to revisit that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
do it very 1st of September, so that'll give us some time if we need to advertise for something.
So you wanna table this for now?
Table it for tonight.
We'll have a meeting 1st of September at some
Do you
point.
want a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
All right, next item is bonds of core lease.
Before we leave cemetery, can we go back there real quick? Didn't we have in the budget street signs, that we were
did.
redoing all those?
We do have street signs, but our quotes came in over budget. So I'm gonna have to pare down the attractiveness of
'Cause,
the
I mean, they
post
look
primarily.
very nice.
They look nice. Basically, they're what I think we need to go to. We have $16,000 budgeted. We rebid them, Allison Payne. We got quotes, $26,000. So I don't think I'm prepared. If we're sitting here telling folks we don't have money to cut the grass, I don't think it's appropriate to blow the budget. We have found some brown signs, very similar to what our street signs look like, but in brown, with a border around them. They're not intricate. They're not like we were planning. And then a galvanized post, and we would propose to paint those brown or black. I've got a photograph in the office if you guys would like to look, if you want to take a few minutes or talk about some other issues. I just don't want to go
Well, that's not
over.
a pressing issue. You can bring that to a.
We're ready to go. It's in the budget, but our bids came back at $26,000, which was
Okay.
$10,000 over budget, so.
So we decide in committee, or we just let that go on to the council?
Why don't you hang on a second? I can go get the pictures for you if you
Well,
want.
no, just our next meeting, because it's not a rush. I mean,
Okay.
Just table, we tabled it to
We'll
next
bring it
meeting.
back.
we've
We'll bring it
been
back.
pushing it now for a while,
Okay.
so.
And also the lighting as well? Any,
Lighting in the cemetery?
You have in here,
that's on here,
Yeah,
right?
you were talking about
I'm-
antique lighting down in there, and you
Oh.
wanted to add that to the.
Off the table, yeah. I can't afford that, but forget it.
Okay. All right, so we've covered the policy, signs, streets, and lighting. Okay. All right, now we're Bon Secours lease.
So you guys know, there was some discussions, and I don't want to say in 16 or 15, but about a year ago, I received a notice from a realtor who claimed to represent Bon Secours at the medical center. And they would like to continue their lease, and they offered to us in writing $22.50 a square foot. I said, boy, that's a good deal. Now, here's the deal and how the armory or the medical center was funded. Historical information for you. The town of Blackstone borrowed in 2009 is when the lending started. The payments probably were in 2010 when we first started making payments. But the borrowing was a 10-year note, and the town of Blackstone had a debt service, still has a debt service, of about $22,000 a month. Okay? Bon Secours' lease with the town was that they would pay for 10 years $22,000, or the equivalent of our mortgage payment, plus
have it paid-
payments back
have it
for
paid
cutting
off.
grass and all that. Okay? So in April of 2019, the medical center will be paid off. We won't own a dime on it anymore. Okay? In 10 years, we'll have 09 to 19, it will be paid off. Okay? So they need to extend their lease. Okay, or the lease needs to be extended. They contacted us and said, we'd like to extend the lease at $22.50 a foot. Well, if we didn't have a bond payment, it's a 10,000 square foot building, that's $22,000 a month. They were proposing to keep the same rate. Sounds good to us, but I think at some point we protested because she wanted the town to commit itself to paying her commission out of that amount. And I don't think, we don't have an agency, a relationship with her. And so we protested and said, we don't want to pay the commission. Bon Secours is your client, they'll pay your commission. Well, her boss, Mr. John Chichester, contacted me. He said, Phil, I've been reading the lease real close, and I think we need to go over this. And I said, well, $22.50 sounds good to us. We're not protesting that. And he said, if you read the lease closely, it drops down to about $2.50 a square foot for the subsequent 2 5-year terms that they're entitled if both parties agree to extend it. Okay.
so a total of just under $2,000, they pay rent a month,
A
which
month.
is,
It ain't much, but they still pay the maintenance. I mean, if we
Have
fix the air
you checked
conditioner, they
that?
fix that. That will be on top. Yep.
okay.
And they pay all utilities.
And they pay the utilities. Yeah.
Because at first it was questionable as to whether they had to pay maintenance on the building. Would that be the town responsibility then? Any of the lawn maintenance. So if they pay that, it sits a little bit better.
But it is not the windfall of cash that I thought at first. I even reported to the mayor. I said, man, there's going to be some money in the general fund coming available. But the lease does indeed, and I think we may have even included the portion of the lease, that it does drop it down by 90% for another 5 years. They have written me a letter and said, we want to continue the lease at the agreed upon rate for an additional 5 years.
Nothing we can do about it. I mean,
As long as you're agreeable. I guess you could say, no, we don't want to lease it to you, but I don't know if you're interested in doing that. I would say that
because you don't
all
want
the
to run.
energy and effort that's been
A
put
little
in.
bit of medical that we do have in Blackstone is right there. And,
That's all we have, isn't it?
yep.
That's information for you. Read the lease. If you have questions, we'll all sit down, and if there's any additional that we need to talk about, I can. But
When you get do we have a motion to accept?
Well, let's read it. I mean, we've
Yeah.
got plenty of time.
yeah, this thing doesn't even kick in for
Okay,
another
all right.
6, 8 months.
We'll just
Okay.
read it and we'll discuss it the next meeting. Okay, downtown parking.
Downtown parking, one of these issues came about when we get people who come to us and want to put apartments downtown on the second floor buildings or first floor even building. And town council has to struggle every time on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not they can meet the parking requirements. The parking requirements for an apartment downtown is 2 spaces per unit, okay? But a lot of folks, i.e. the Moody's at the Old People's Building, their building is at the four corners. They cannot physically provide parking unless they lease it or buy it from somewhere else or that sort of thing. Their property won't provide for off-street parking, okay? So one of the options that I looked at, instead of doing what we preach, or doing the opposite of what we preach, where we want people shopping, living, and eating downtown and a vibrant downtown, one of my suggestions to the council was, why don't we see if there's ways that we can increase public parking in downtown so we can offset some of the concerns that people have. I really don't think we have a nighttime parking problem. The parking problem is during the day when the bank is full of employees and we're full of employees and all. That's usually the biggest problem. So I contacted the railroad, and believe it or not, the railroad was very gracious and they're agreeable. I haven't got it in writing, but they're agreeable to lease us additional space alongside the railroad track. We would have to take out that loading dock and grade it and put a small retaining wall and some other things over there, but we could put additional parking along the railroad, and I think they're gonna be agreeable to it. He said, how far do you wanna go? And I said, all the way to the curve in the road behind the other. So we'll see what happens with that. I received an email and I contacted the fellow and said, hey, have you got something in writing? I have a meeting tonight. He said, I'll get it to you ASAP, but I don't think the railroad's gonna protest doing it.
As much grief as they've given us before, I'm surprised.
The cost of all will be borne by the
Correct.
town. Now, we lease other property, and it's about $450 a year is what we're paying now currently for lease for some of that parking lot across the street. Okay. I'm gonna pursue that. I have one other individual who may or may not be interested, and there's a vacant lot next to Margie Nevins's Nottaway Office Services, and they're always keenly interested in perhaps working with the town. That would have to be a purchase, though. I don't think that's gonna be a lease situation. And the third item on downtown parking is the parking lot that is across the street from Barbara's office. So everybody knows what the status of that is. That does not belong to the town, nor does the town have a lease on the property. It is out of the good graces of the family that they just let people park over there. We try to put gravel in the parking lot and smooth it out periodically, and I think you put some handicap signs up years ago, but for the most part, that really is governed by the family. And if we were to lose that, we probably would be in a parking jam, especially at lunchtime around a Mexican restaurant and the farm.
If it was paved and marked off, we'd probably get more parking.
Well, we made a proposal. If you remember, we applied for a downtown grant, remember? And part of that grant application was we wanted to purchase that property. And I don't think the family, they certainly told me they weren't prepared to sell it. And they did not want to sign a long-term lease, 20 years, 90 years, any of that kind of stuff. They didn't want to do that because they didn't want to get bound. If somebody walked up and said, I want to put a building on your property, they didn't want to have to buy out of a lease with the town for parking, okay? Part of the reason we didn't get the grant, and they noted, was that parking lot was unaddressed in the project. It is owned privately. Would they sell it? Maybe something's changed. That's been 2 years ago at least. But it is privately owned. But the town does go on there and do some maintenance. It would be great if it were paved. It would be great if it would be striped. And we had proposed to do that. Antique lights and all the above. But we couldn't do it because they didn't want to sell it. And we couldn't do it on a long-term lease, and DHCD would not have given us the grant money without a lease in hand or a longer term. Okay.
In addition to the downtown parking, I had a business person ask me about providing longer than 2-hour parking for her customers.
You want to take flowers off graves? You can touch 2-hour parking too. That flame will be there as well. That is a topic that me and
You got
previous
some that are
councils have
adamant that it must stay, and you got some that are adamant that it's ridiculous.
not stay,
So-
yeah. It can certainly be discussed, but it has been a hot topic over probably the past 5 years, yeah.
What about putting, businesses that have somebody from out of town coming, to keep them here, give them a placard with a date like they do at Pickett at the entrance. It's good for parking at this for all day during the business hours, and they can stay there without being ticketed. That would.
Could be, and get them through the police
help with
department.
Tourism for, to make people wanting to come.
It's certainly a topic that could take some more discussion, but there is a mixed bag of reaction from the business owners who are frustrated because adjacent business owners park in front of the business. And I think if business owners would prevent their employees from parking downtown, you could do away with the 2-hour parking. But that is the rub. That's where business person gets pitted against business person in making an impassioned plea that on-street parking is being used by employees all day long. And so we're having to write tickets. But we are writing tickets. The chief is authorized to go out here and work it.
How often do they do it? Every day?
No, I wouldn't say every day. No, I don't know, but
We voted, and I don't know if we need to revisit this being that it's a new council, but we voted several years ago that whatever parking ticket money we collected would be donated to the food bank. So like I believe this past year it was $296.
like 400 the year before. So at
So
$10 a
it's
pop,
not
they
a-
wrote 40 tickets.
It's not a great amount, but. Zach?
Philip and I have had a few slight conversations
2020. I have every intention of applying for downtown investment grants, which are most likely going to be in the $25,000–50,000 range. And I'd like for that to go towards parking downtown too, especially like the lot we talked about, beautifying that one. Antique lighting, bushes, fences, pavement, you know, we like.
No flower bed.
No flower bed.
No flower bed. Please.
But that's one of our future projects and goals as well. So if we can work on project details, whatever timelines are, we can better apply for those grants.
Okay. Excellent. Anything else to discuss on that?
As soon as I receive something formal from the railroad, I'll forward it to you guys, to the committee, and y'all can have it ready for the next committee meeting.
The next is a three-phase electric.
Three-phase service, this is a letter that was provided to Frank Carlo, and you guys may have heard some of this in the past, and industrial park and all those kinds of things. I'm parallel tracking this with you guys, but also with the finance committee, because there's a dollar figure associated with this thing. We're talking about approximately $450,000 or $460,000 was the cost, and that would get it to that would get it to Frank Carlo's building. Okay, if you read the letter that was sent to him, we have met with Southside Electric. Southside Electric is certainly happy to go ahead and start the construction and get things going. The gentleman at the junction, Lonnie Smith, who owns Structural Components.
Structural concepts.
Structural concepts and components. I went and met with him and said, do you want to participate in the cost share to get the line over here? Because the finance committee asked me to speak to all the property owners that legitimately would be affected or could benefit from it. And he said, well, it's been so long that I've been struggling with this. I've already paid for the phase converters that I need for my equipment. So no, I'm okay. I'd love to have it in case my equipment needs to be upgraded or something like that. He said, but at this point, no, I don't need the three-phase service because I've already purchased a three-phase conductor. Okay. Talked to Frank Carlo and I said, Frank, if the power gets to the corner at the water tank, it would be my expectation that you would take it from the water tank back to your building at your cost. We're getting it, and my goal would be to get it to the entrance of Babs Lane and Northwest Avenue. Okay. So I think that.
What was his response?
Pretty muted. Pretty
I
muted.
don't think it should be the taxpayer's
No.
responsibility to get it into someone's building so that they can collect a higher.
We want to
rate.
get it to the entrance to the industrial park and then let each
I agree.
case. I think we've take the people's money and a lion's share of that to make it happen. We're still working on, just so you know, it would be my expectation if it was $450,000, it'd be $225,000 to the town. I think Mr. Byers would be agreeable to paying the half. I will tell you this, that the 225, if you remember, we have 100 cash already set up where we cut the timber in the industrial park in 2017, and we also sold a lot in the industrial park to Jason Walker. We haven't spent that money, we have it set aside, and that would be about $100,000 between the two. The difference, I'm going to have to figure out. If we're going to move forward, I would have to come up with a plan on how to pay it, because I do believe Southside will allow you over a period of years that you can pay for the improvements. So I'd have to have an expectation that I'd have to budget 20% a year for 5 years at a minimum.
Is there a possibility that we have the three-phase, that more industries will come in and be there, and then they can have a cost share of that portion?
I think going from that corner, then they would be on their own to get that in there, okay? If we can just get it to the entrance to the industrial park, and then any new industry or somebody that bought the property or wanted to develop in there, you and Southside just get together and meet.
$450,000 to go 4.1 miles, I believe. So, I mean, for Frank Carlos to do it from the corner of Babs and Northwest Avenue, it wouldn't cost him much to get it to his actual building.
If it's $100,000 a mile, he's a quarter mile.
Yeah, it's much less. I mean,
Maybe $25,000 would be a reasonable cost that would go to Frank. Nothing good about it. I don't like it.
no, it's,
But as the man of the Southside State Corporation Commission said, they don't have to agree with your idea.
you know, we have a line running right behind every bit of it.
Yeah, and the town has a line serving the whole area, but it's not our territory, and we recognize that, and we
We can
understand.
only hook up our own buildings.
Okay, so the reason I don't have anything more formal, but I will probably at this next council meeting, part of what we're trying to accomplish now with that project, which is a big 1,450 unit potential project, and Nottaway Commons, which has resuscitated itself, which is next to the bowling alley. We're trying to figure out not sewer capacity. We know the treatment capacity. We need to find something, right? Tobacco Commission has received from the county preliminary information about $180,000 grant to work at the plant. We've asked a guard to give us 400,000 gallons of their reserve capacity. The post commander said, well, it's on the desk of the adjutant general, but as soon as I hear something or I know something, I'll let you know. And that is the key to all of it. If that doesn't happen, I don't have a solution other than upgrade the plant. So number two, the solution is we also need to upgrade some piping. The pipes that serve these facilities, specifically the force main that goes from Rocky Bump Pump Station back to Fort Pickett, is 10-inch. And according to MacBug calculations, if those two projects fully build out as proposed, it'll need to be a 12-inch force main. Okay? There's a significant amount of improvements that need to go. And we need to talk to those property owners and say, this is yours, and this is ours. Okay? We have some culpability. We need to provide sewer. We said, yes, we'll rezone you and all those kinds of things, but the reality is our force main is 10 inches, and if he builds 1,425 houses and Nottaway Commons builds a 400-room hotel and all those things happen, it needs to be a 12-inch pipe. Okay? And there's some other, obviously, pump upgrades and that sort of thing. So we're working on that. That is forthcoming, and hopefully we can wrap it up. Mr. Byers from Austin Woods or the Gravity Property will be in my office tomorrow, and we'll continue to go over these. Okay? Hopefully we can report.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Second Street ditch.
Y'all have at your desk the culvert policy.
You're on, finally. Finally. We're there. This very nice lady has a problem.
Explain where she's at.
I'm on camera, I got it.
My name is Mary LeGrand, and I live on 605 2nd Street in Blackstone, Virginia.
Is that between College and
Yeah.
Amelia?
It is. All right.
My problem is the ditch.
The ditch.
And I have some pictures here where when it rains, it flows from the other side of the town, where the shades are, over on my sides, and the water comes about halfway the yard. And this was some taken in April. Here. And I still have a pile of sand in there because I didn't want to move it. Well, Barbara,
You've seen it, just show it.
I've been over there.
Where is it actually supposed to be draining to? Obviously, it has to run downhill, so town's property is higher. Does it run under the street, or is there a culvert pipe
it's
there?
under the street.
Okay, then what does it run to after?
It comes through another, it's like this is the side where the town shade is. Then it comes up, come across underneath the ground and comes over.
Okay. So the ditch is not taking all of it on your side, but we may need to.
And I've been
Does
fighting
it
this for a
drop down
while.
into those trees there? Is that the
No, it goes around the
ditch?
corner. It's water that comes off of, if you know where the concrete
Correct, yeah.
reservoir is, and it comes in a culvert pipe directly aimed right at her, okay? And it's a low spot right there. It takes some water from up around where Gus Mitchell lives, and
Yeah.
it comes around that ditch line and that curve there. And it does take some water from behind Mary's house, okay? And it's that way, it's a mess, and it's an open ditch, it's on town property. I don't think there's a contention that what needs to be done. I think the contention is Mary's request specifically is going to be, she would prefer not to participate the cost share. The policy says people are supposed to share. And
I mean,
she's
that's
requesting
obvious.
relief from paying for the.
If the town's shop wasn't across the street, okay. But we've obviously got a lot of hard surface over there, impermeable surfaces that are.
We are the adjoining property owner, and the water that shoots directly across the
It's from
street on
us.
her
It's coming from over there.
primarily comes from the town lot over there. And I'm not, my recommendation to the council would be, there's some other solutions. We talked with the street committee a little bit, when we went out there and rode with the bus the other day. Even though it was on your committee, I think you rode with us and we looked at it. If my opinion is, and some on the committee felt like it may be better just to reroute some piping on the other side of the street to prevent that water from coming to Mary. But if we're gonna spend that money,
Yeah,
It may as
I'm gonna
well.
do it on Mary's side
and be done
That's
with it.
right.
and solve her problem and our problem, and everybody gets the problem solved.
Yeah, because if you redirect piping, you're digging up road. You're,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
if I'm gonna spend the money to do that, I might as well just spend the the money on her side of the road and do that at no cost. You know, she wouldn't participate in anything on the other side. It's my opinion and my recommendation that the town, because of the circumstances, and please understand,
Because it's our property.
it's our
Yeah.
property. So there are circumstances, but it would be my recommendation that we go ahead and address it. It would take a stormwater box to be put in. It would take the water coming from the east to the west and from the south to the north, and the water from our
How
pipe.
many feet of pipe are you looking at?
What is your property? Do you know right offhand?
I
I'd say it's
don't-
about
I don't know
75
right-
feet. It's
right
part of that
offhand.
West Blackstone block.
It's 25 foot a lot.
So it's 25-foot lot, so I dare say it's 75 feet. It doesn't have to be more than that.
And then does it drop, where, I mean, are we just shoving the issue down the street to the next person? Where does it go?
Just open ditch just past her.
Okay.
But
But it's an open ditch, it's
it's
not
an
a,
open ditch, and they're not complaining about it. Mary's got a manicured yard. The yard next door probably, or at least the ditch line next door is not as manicured, for sure.
so you're not the house, you've got the Mitchell's house,
Uh-huh.
and then there's, is it your house?
No.
No, it's
Okay.
the Mitchell's house, and it's another big house on the corner.
Correct.
Come on down, it's Mr. Agard's house,
Okay.
and then I'm right in the middle, and Miss Gray
Okay,
house.
so there's 3 houses there.
There's 3 houses below, or in that block that
Gotcha.
face on Second Street. And if we're gonna make improvements, let's go make them on her side, so she doesn't have to mow a ditch. We don't have to worry about silt building up in her yard.
And you're sure that will solve the whole issue though?
No, you're just moving on down the line, yeah.
Well, no, but
Will she be satisfied? Yeah.
once it gets past her property, it's downhill from what I'm understanding.
Yeah, it goes around the corner.
Yeah.
And it goes into that big culvert that we put in as part of that Church Street project
Yeah.
and goes behind all the houses down there. to Church Street. It will make an aesthetic difference that she doesn't have that. It's still gonna be the same amount of water,
Mhm.
but she won't be able to,
But it's not gonna be running in somebody else's yard.
no, not in the yard. It'll stay in the ditch all the time.
So the house down below her is not gonna have a problem?
No, because it'll be in the
It'll
town's
stay in the
ditch,
ditch.
shoulder of the road, it'll stay in the road, the same amount of water. We're not creating more water, we're just hiding it, and hiding the silt by putting a pipe in a box in her front yard.
Are we setting a precedence for other property owners if we do this?
You're sitting a president, and that people are gonna ask you, well, you didn't make mayor pay, so why you making me
That's
pay?
right.
You know that
That's
you're on
right.
council.
It's been a
or-
problem
It's
forever.
town property that's adjacent, that's
That's why
across
we
the
say,
street.
because of
That's
the
issue.
particular circumstances, that we would do that, because, and I would never recommend to you guys wholly bearing the cost on private property. Don't do that, okay? The town used to do some stuff on private property, now it's all the responsibility of the owner, and these ditches are the responsibility by policy, and I think there's a culvert policy also that you provided to
Yeah,
everybody.
we have a,
And if you look at that, that is a deviation, and we probably adopted that 2 or 3 years ago, but that was a deviation from what it used to be. It used to be, if the property owner bought the pipe, we would install it.
Correct.
Yeah.
For years, that's what it was. And, that is actually the formal policy right now that the town has adopted.
So we don't do that now. You buy the pipe in the time.
It's- Property owner pays. And I'm asking, she's asking, and I'm recommending that we waive it on her circumstance, because the majority of the water that's getting on her in her yard comes from the town side.
You're gonna hear some stuff, cause somebody told me about some water that was running, the town's water, they said.
Yeah, it's not,
It's running.
we gotta remember, this isn't just street water. This is, we've got our big concrete tank over there. We've got the garbage truck shed, the salt shed.
Yeah, we can hear some guff about it. I'm not telling you, you won't, but I think you need to prep yourself for that conversation, and this is why we did it.
Yeah.
If you-
Now,
Yeah,
the silt,
Somebody else is gonna question it.
you said
Oh,
there's
yeah.
silt coming through and
We're
discharging?
putting a couple check dams across the street, so I think it's less, but I don't
Okay.
think it's stopped altogether now.
And the silt's just from rock dust and everything.
It's real muddy if you notice on the, if you look at that ditch line that runs to the east of the concrete tank, I mean, it's mud dauber nest.
Yeah.
It's just a wet piece of ground, and it's very wet. And I'm sure some of it comes from the alley, I'm sure some of it comes from all kinds of different sources, but the town owns that problem. I don't wanna get you all jammed up, and
I mean, I think
I don't-
just because it's, and I've never been one to pay for someone's problems, but with this being that it's born on the town side, I make a motion that we recommend to the full council to pay for this circumstance because it's, the town's the culprit of it.
I second it.
you in agreement?
I'm in agreement, yes, yes.
Man, you're not done yet. You still gotta get 4 others to.
I know.
I think you'll be good.
But,
thank you.
Sam is gone.
Same.
Okay, our last item on the agenda, thank you very much. The last item is the Virginia Street alleyway.
Mr. Yates is here, and I'm sure will want to make an impassioned presentation, but what we're talking about is an alley that sits between, and we looked at it with the street committee, and you're familiar with it, and it runs from Virginia Avenue back to 10th Street in a north-south fashion, and I think Mr. Yates has been here on 2 occasions asking that it be closed, and I think the council previously had voted not to close it. And Mr. Yates is reigniting his request. Is that correct? Good. I'm out of the way.
What I want to say first is to thank everybody that came out and looked at the alley. I appreciate it.
If you would get to the microphone, because you're being recorded and we need to be able to
All right.
hear that.
Thank everybody that came out to look at the alley. I really appreciate it. And Eric, we especially thank you for being there that night that we needed you for the emergency of the rescue squad. We can't thank you enough. I have asked several times for it to be closed, but this last time I had a reason. As Eric can tell you, I have a family member that is very ill. My house is very small. I wanted to add a room on to it. And it would have to go all the way out. I had a builder from Richmond that used to build things in Richmond for me, and he came out and looked, and he said, you're already real close to the alley, Alan. You're closer than anybody else there. Everybody else has got huge yards, they're way away, but I'm right there at the alley, and if we add on to it without the alley being closed, you're gonna be even closer. And I don't think you wanna be any closer to the alley. But I asked to have a room built on and a bath for handicap for Sonny, as you know. He's been real ill, just got him out of the hospital again today. And this took so long to try to have anything done that I went ahead and tried to sell the house with the real estate, and I couldn't get anything. So at the church, someone heard that I was selling it after it was long enough for the real estate to drop it. And they came and looked at it, and they put a contract on it. And it's a VA contract, and today I call them, it's taking forever, and they're not sure that they're gonna be able to get the money to buy the house. That's what they told me today. So I'm not gonna fool with, if that happens, I don't wanna fool. This is a lot for me to go through with a loved one this ill. And I just can't go through with trying to sell it again. But I need that space to be able to put a huge bathroom, to build it so it will be low, so we can use a wheelchair to get access in and out and not have any steps. And I've asked for that, and I seem to get nowhere. And Philip, I'm not trying to say anything against you, but every time that I have tried to close that alley, it was Harold Davis this, Harold Davis this, Harold Davis this. That's all I heard.
He was vehemently opposed to closing.
Yeah, and now that Harold Davis no longer owns the property behind us, the other evening when you were over there, I was in the process of coming out the door, had the door open this far. What should I hear? And my uncle sitting in the chair in the den, Sally Beal doesn't want this alley closed. You have never come to me once and say, Alan, I hope that you can close it. You have a
Sally
sick.
never told me anything about
Well, you said right to these
I didn't
people
say that. No, sir.
you did. You said
I-
Sally Beal wants it
What I
closed.
said was that you and your neighbor had to be separated by the police department down there over the alley. That was the part that I remarked.
But that's the other thing is she doesn't want it closed. But why? I mean, there's no driveways along it. I have maintained it going into 6 years, cutting the grass. I maintain the ditch. A lot of big stuff washes down in the ditch. Sometimes I have it cleaned out. I pay for it. I cut the grass once a week. There's not been, and she's checked, and she told me there's not been any activity in the alley for years. There's no cars that drive down it. Now, the other end where it comes in on 10th Street, that house that rents, they do use that to come in, but it's not coming up on my part. But before, when it was rented, the people are out of it now, and it's changed hands. Before, when it was rented, those people parked right in the alley. They used it as a parking space. It was closed from that end. People, if they wanted to come in there, they could not. I mean, that went on for 2 years.
I remember them parking in the back when Ben Don was living
Yeah,
there.
that was a wonderful family. You
Have
couldn't
you
ask.
looked the setbacks? What are setbacks in that area?
15%.
Have we looked at this situation?
I have not. I know that he had made a request or.
I
is
mean,
interested
my
in
concern is
addition.
though, if the alley is closed, does he have enough to build what he wants
I
to
think depending
at
on the
that
size of the
point?
unit,
Because
he may have
obviously,
enough now.
half of it goes to the
Half of
other
it
adjacent
goes-
property owner. Granted, it's only probably, what, a 10-foot alley? Or is it more?
It's a 20-foot alley.
It's a 20-foot, so
20
10
foot.
foot
It's not
would
that
go.
Sally doesn't want to close.
Correct, no.
Sally doesn't want to receive the 10 feet and be required to maintain it. So the decision would have to be that she, by act of vacation, if we abandon it, she automatically, or the Beatles, and the adjoining property owners on either side would each get half. Her commentary is not that she doesn't want to close. That's not accurate. What is accurate is she doesn't want to be responsible to maintain those 10 feet. So she would have to, the property owners would have to work with Mr. Yates and dedicate their share to it, if that's what they so choose to do. There may be enough room on the side now. I don't know the width of his property because side setbacks are determined by the width of the frontage. If you've got 100 feet, he's got to have a 15-foot setback. Depends on the size of the addition that he's proposing.
Do you know the size you're proposing?
No, but I can call the builder and,
Can we
and
get this
get a
information? I mean,
copy
is it-
of that. That's what I'll do. Now, as far as Sally doesn't want to maintain it, the first time we tried to close it, she signed something and it came over here that she wanted it closed, but all of a sudden she changed her mind. Now, I don't mind, money is not a problem with us. We're not rich, but we've got money to do things. I don't mind buying that. If Sally was going to give it to us.
That would be between you and Sally.
He was gonna give it to us, but it never materialized, and I don't mind buying whatever if she wants to sell it and doesn't wanna maintain it, but there's no reason for it to, I mean, it's just sitting there, I mean, there's nothing driving up and down it, and I mean, she
I
doesn't,
have a question if I
she
may.
doesn't, I mean,
Chief Kuzniak, who, and an officer went out to kind of settle some misunderstanding perhaps between the adjacent property owner and Mr. Yates. And the understanding that the chief came back to me with was that we were going to remove the flower pots that the adjacent property owner wanted the alley opened, and the chairs and the flower pots would be removed. I went over there and physically removed them with Mr. Yates that day, and then they went right back. And I don't know what happened to the agreement that you had with the chief, or the understanding you had with the chief, but the flower pots are back, and I don't know what happened.
they are back. Ben Green is no longer here. He was the one that gave me permission to put the flower pots there. I was told that the police should not be involved in anything there. It was council people that would be involved in anything to move or anything to be done with the alley.
Well, the alley's open.
So that's what I was told.
Yeah.
And Ben Green told me that that it was fine to put them there, and they've been there 5 years.
But you told the chief you were going to move them, and I went over there and moved them with you.
Well, that was because I didn't know that until after Ben Green, he was still on the council, and I told him, and he said, I said, he said, I gave you permission to put those. I told you it was okay. So I said, well, I'm gonna put them back. So I did, but you did move
So
them.
can we just get a diagram of to what the board is proposing? Philip asked, check with this,
I
what the
can tell you
setback
in
needs to
15
be.
minutes how much you need,
Um,
and if you need the alley to put your
I
addition.
mean, just,
And I don't want the thing of it too, I don't want the alley any closer to my house and what it is. Because I need this space if I stay there. I mean, if I stay there. If it goes through, then I'm not. And then the people that are moving there do want to put a carport, but I'll let them handle that. And they will also want the alley
Irregardless,
closed.
I wouldn't recommend the council closing that portion, which is adjacent to the old crafting place on 10th Street.
correct, yeah.
That needs to stay.
No,
open,
that, I
because that's
agree with
used as a-
that.
Well, and the town does own property in there for some odd reason, I don't
And
know
we own
why.
another lot in there, yeah,
Yeah.
in behind, and it's like a long strip, it may have been granted as a sewer right of way or something,
Yeah.
but there's actually a strip of town-owned property between you and the old crafting place. That you-
That's what you're talking about. Yeah, I agree that back there does need to, I mean, I have no
Maybe
problem
we'll
with
abandon
that.
that at the same time when we have these discussions.
But, you know, I own a lot and a half, so I own all the way from there, all the way back toward my fences, which is almost that whole, and I don't mind, I'm not complaining that I maintained it, I don't mind, but never once has anybody come, one of the neighbors come and say, well, Alan, do you need some help in cutting the grass? Do you need some help in cleaning the ditch? I mean, I would say no anyway, but nobody has never come to ask me. I've done it on my own to keep things looking nice. When I first received the property, that place was in Oh, yeah, it was in terrible shape. I mean, there was great big deep holes where the water just filled up and mosquitoes just come everywhere. I had people come down, I paid to have all that taken care of. I paid to have the ditch cleaned out when I come there. There was just so much stuff in there that I couldn't physically get down and move it. I paid, and which I'm not complaining about, I was glad to do it. But I maintain the alleys. Nobody uses this alley. I just can't see why, especially when I have a loved one that's sick and telling me that I can't build my property. I mean, we'll do whatever measurements there are to make it smaller. I want it as big as I can get it. The price that he's giving me is $36,000. Well, I don't mind that. As I said, money is not a problem. We're going to pay cash for it.
I think the issue in the past was that your neighbors didn't want to close.
And I think at one time they did though, and I don't know this didn't even know about the police event, all that stuff, but I think it was just recent history, I guess, that has probably created sour apples in some people's.
Well, let me just tell you what created that. I had left the house one day to go pick some medicine up for Sonny at Walmart, and he lays down there every evening to take a nap. When I came back, he said to me, I saw the woman from the Wynn house drive around her house in the front where they park. They don't park at the back, drive around the front, drive through her yard. She drove over on our property, crossed the alley, drove on our property, and parked her vehicle. I went down, because when I got back, the vehicle wasn't there, but I went down and I saw the car tracks, what she had actually come up with. Not just the alley, but on my land, and parked the vehicle. And when we said something to her, the words were, she said, "You all can go to hell. This alley is open for me to drive up and down like I want to drive up and down it, and if I want to do it, I'm going to do it, and I'll knock the flower pots out of the way." Well, she threatened us, so it scared us, because we're up in age, and my uncle's up in age, and he just bawled and started crying when she talked to us. She literally jumped out in the alley behind us when we were sitting in the chairs. So we called the police because we were more afraid that she might harm us, not parking another vehicle in the alley on our land. We didn't want that. We were afraid that we would be harmed because she sort of threatened us.
Well, let's get the measurements. Let's get the measurements so we can go from
Very
there.
simply done.
And I think that's our next step. And
Okay.
then we're planning on meeting for September to bring it back up.
And obviously, property owners, being that it's been reignited, needs to be notified if we do go to think about closing the alley. So,
Yeah.
All property owners.
all in that
Public hearing.
area.
Yeah, it's gonna be-
Yeah.
Okay, sure, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Pretty quickly, and I know we're gonna put this off the next month. This is $8,000, brown signs, standard pole. This is what the committee approved years ago. Antique, nice, fancy. Bases appearing like our antique light poles downtown, 26,000.
So are those poles already black?
I think we'll have to paint. No, I think it'll be
Okay.
galvanized. It just shows.
Because I think that's what makes the difference, is it?
Make them black.
Yeah.
So that's the direction, unless you guys have an opposition, I don't want to go over.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And we still get the
Go
same
for it.
kind of sign, but it's just not scalloped and fancy.
Yeah.
That's
good.
Is there anybody else that needs to come to the committee for anything? Okay, you're just back there listening. Glad to have you. All right. If there's nothing else, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting.